Hey, what's going on? This is a political Brown Kid here. I want to talk about and revisit the topic that I've been talking about lately and that everybody's talking about, and that is love and relationships. Especially love and relationships when you're 40 plus. It's getting rough out there. It is really getting rough out there. Now, the one thing I'm going to say is this. I'm going to preface this with this because this video is going to focus on just the loneliness, just talking about the loneliness aspect of individuals, men and women. I didn't think, growing up, when I was growing up, you always heard about old people in old folks' homes being lonely. You always heard those stories, like, just some old elderly person that's in their 70s, 80s, sitting in an old folks' home, just lonely, had no one to talk to. And like you can even watch the movie like Cocoon, but Cocoon is a little bit different because they had their group of friends. If you ever watched that movie, they did Cocoon and then Cocoon 2 or Return to Cocoon or whatever. So they really didn't show like a bunch of old lonely people because the old people had their group that they lived and hung out with together. But even if you watched the Twilight Zone had a movie. In one of it was like a trilogy of stories, and then one of the stories was Kick the Can, and it was basically an old guy who, his kid and his kid's family would come and visit him every so often, but he was in the old folks home and he seemed pretty lonely, and then they played Kick the Can and regained their youth and so forth. But you always heard these stories about old people being lonely. But if you look at it, I'm like, man, it ain't just old people. It's people in their 40s. Because like I said, if you guys have been looking at my threads and looking at stuff that I have, when you're in your 40s and you're dating, it can get lonely. Your life can get lonely. You don't really realize how lonely you are. And you don't think that it would be like that or be this rough in your 40s, maybe 50s, 60s if you're in your 50s or 60s. But I'm in my 40s. But you wouldn't think that it would be that way for 40-year-olds. But it is. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I've had two females and we're just friends. We started out meeting each other on dating platform, but it just didn't work, as far as chemistry and connection. But this one female just called me just the other day. And she texted me and she actually texted my phone. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. I mean, it's probably been damn near a month. Hadn't even heard from her. Then she pops up, texting me, hey, talking. So I guess she wanted somebody to talk to. So I called her, gave her a call. And in the midst of that conversation, I'm just catching up with her, asking how she's doing. And then she mentioned how lonely she is. That's the conversation went in that direction. Like she was like talking about how lonely she was. And then she mentioned, she said to me, man, my phone doesn't even ring. She's like, my phone doesn't even ring anymore. She was like, and I sit in this house and I'm just so lonely. I'm lonely. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, and you think, you're like, wow. And then I had another female say the same thing. The other female that, there was no love connection there either. And she's just like how lonely she is. And, she talked about how lonely she is. And I can attest to it because, like I said, there are times when I'm in this house and I get lonely. Thus, I make a lot of these videos. I sit here because I have nothing else to do. But you look and even when you go out in the street, it gets even worse because, like I said, you get dressed, you go out and you try to meet individuals and you just don't realize how awkward it is when you're in your 40s trying to meet people. It is you would think that it would be easier, but it is not. Like I said, when we were young and when you were teenagers, it was easy to meet individuals. It was easy to meet individuals of the opposite sex. To me, it was a lot easier. When you're in your 40s, first thing you have to worry about is, because you assume this person's 40, they have to be married. I know they probably have kids, especially if you see them with a kid. Then you're like, well, I don't even know if I should approach this person. Number one, you can't approach somebody when they have their kid out with them, so, the woman doesn't want that. She doesn't want to be sexualized in front of her child. So that's the first obstacle. But then if you see her out and she's out, you don't know whether to approach her because if she out on a date, she's 40, maybe her man is somewhere lurking around the corner. Then you're trying to sneak a peek at her finger and see if she's, attached or anything. And then also too, when you get older, you just typically stay in the house and you're not outside. But then also that's the culture of today's society too, even with young kids, because society is now so virtual and the connections are made online. But it's just an awkward time. And it's just as far as being in your 40s and trying to meet other people, it is hard. So, and I'm just bringing that up to say this for the females out there. It's like, for females that say they're looking, but I'm just trying to figure out if you're looking, why is everybody so lonely? Because there are guys out here, myself included, who would love to, have the company of a female to be with. Fortunately, like I said, for myself, these two females didn't work out, you know, um, and it was more of an attraction issue. I'll say that one was an attraction issue, and the other one just her. It was a personality thing. It was more like, I couldn't see myself being with that individual. Um, she just didn't really seem too stable, as far as like being in your 40s and just now trying to figure life out and figuring out your career, in your 40s. And it was like, wow, I'm not going to divulge her what she's going through, but it was just kind of like, wow, you going to be working until you about 95. You just kind of starting. So, and I just didn't want to be responsible for taking care of someone. Um, all of that was playing out in my mind. But that's really what I just wanted to say is like, you know, if we're out here lonely, I think that, just be a little bit more receptive. I know that people want to say that they have standards, and even with myself, but I don't think that my standards are really high. I'm just really kind of looking for somebody to mess and match with, and hang out with. Um, but you do have to have that, hopefully you have to have that chemistry. But, again, I think men are a little bit more easier, more flexible in terms of, appearance and in terms of personalities. I'm running into a lot of women today that just give up on guys over the slightest things. I've had two women give up on me just over some. It was just kind of like, wow, they just like, I'm done. Because you say one thing that they just didn't like, you say the wrong thing to them, and they like, I'm done. And it's like, wow, seriously? And they just like, yeah, and I'm fine. And they like, I'm fine being by myself and I don't have a problem. I'm done. And they walk away. And it's just kind of like, wow. But I don't let like one thing that an individual say to me bother me to that extent. But I just wanted to touch base on this, epidemic of loneliness. It seems to be pervasive. And just want individuals to, give other individuals a chance. Make sure that you allow people into your lives, allow people to make mistakes, and then you can grow from those mistakes. But just make sure that you're out here, because as you get older, it is going to get harder in terms of socializing. So just be safe out there. Make sure that you make friends, make contacts, check in on people too if you think that they don't have anyone in their life. And make sure that they're okay, because there are some people out here that really need a friend, really need people to talk to. This is the Political Brown Kid. Be well.